Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Igniting Lifelong Literacy, a Chippewa River Writing Project approach. We are so excited that you're joining us and tuning in through whatever listening method you choose. Before we get started with today's content, I'd like to read our land acknowledgement. The Chippewa River Writing Project is based at Central Michigan University, located in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, founded in 1892 as Central Michigan Normal School. CMU is located on the ancestral grounds of the Council of the Three Fires, the Anishinaabe of whom the Saginaw Chippewa Nation is one. Ceded under duress in 1855 and 1864 treaties, this land was named the Isabella Indian Reservation and remains part of the homeland of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian tribe. It is our responsibility to care for this land and its people, and to be intentional and inclusive in our work. We recognize that this acknowledgement is only meaningful when combined with purposeful actions and genuine relationships that honor the land and its people. These actions include advocating for the histories, cultures, and languages, and the territorial rights of historic Indigenous peoples. As our writing project grows to include members from outside Mount Pleasant, we invite all CRWP members to recognize their own connection to the lands on which they reside and to honor their own responsibilities to the original keepers of those lands. In case you forgot, since it's been a month, I'm just one of the hosts of this podcast. My name is Lyndsay Young, and my co-host, Becky Schwartz. If you want to know more about us, we encourage you to listen to our introduction episode. Today, we will begin the second episode in our 5-part series on the topic of independent reading. The focus of the podcast today is creating an independent reading culture in your classroom. So I'm going to be talking from the perspective of an elementary teacher. So I am very passionate about this, about fostering a reading culture in my classroom, because I want my students to become lifelong readers. That is something I'm passionate about and want for them. So building this culture is the first step. In my classroom, I've created reading areas around the room so students have comfortable places to read. I know I enjoy sitting by the fire in my newly built house. We just built it 2 years ago, and I have this really nice shiplap fireplace in my living room, and I love getting cozy on the couch and reading a book. And I feel like students need to see that you can be comfortable. Reading is not just something you do in school in these hard desks. You can be comfortable when you read. I think that's extremely important. So I prioritize providing similar spaces for my students. Studies have shown that setting up cozy, quiet spaces with easy accessible books, creating an inviting reading environment, can make reading feel like a special, enjoyable activity rather than just another task and something we're just assigning them, right? So bright, engaging book covers, comfortable seating, and good lighting enhances that space and encourages children to spend time there. And they want to spend that time there. I have students that are begging me, Miss Young, can we use reading spots today? Like, they're excited about reading. And by providing those spots, it even makes reading more exciting. Another important aspect of fostering this reading culture is providing a variety of texts across different levels and genres. My classroom library has over 2,000 books, and I'm still gathering more. I tell my kids, I always want more books. And this provides students the opportunity to have plenty of reading material to explore and find what they enjoy. Anytime we receive new books at my house, my husband gives me that look and says really, more books? Then I happily geek out and summarize every book I got from Amazon or First Book. It just makes me excited. And again, I'm always getting more books in my library, so I'm providing those books for my students. So according to This Not That, No More Independent Reading Without Support, students need access to a wide range of texts to develop as readers. In regards to this idea of students finding books, for elementary students, choosing a just right book can be extremely challenging. I know when I was in elementary school, I had the hardest time finding a book that was good for me, and I gave up on so many books because I just couldn't find the right one. So I always start the year by teaching the I-Pick strategy from the Daily 5 Fostering Literacy Independence in the Elementary Grades by Gail Boucher and Joe Moser. So for upper elementary and high school teachers or middle school teachers that have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, IPIC is an acronym for students. So it helps them remember how to find just right books. So IPIC, the I stands for I choose, P stands for the purpose, I interest, C comprehension, and K know the words. So this is kind of again, these steps help students to know how to pick a good fit for them and a book that's not too easy for them and not too hard, but it's going to be a just right book where it's challenging them. So they're still going to be gaining reading skills and progressing in their reading. And using the strategy, students learn to identify books that are good fits for them, making them more independent readers, both in and out of the classroom. But I believe it's not just about providing reading material and space. It's also about showing students that I am a reader myself. And it's important for me to inspire students to get excited about books. So every week, I, without fail, will recommend a book to my students through a book talk or a book trailer. So I am getting my students excited about reading and introducing them into quality texts. I know for a fact after a book talk or a book trailer, over like half my class wants to read that book. They add it to the TBR list in their notebooks, and I actually have to have a sign-up list. So students can barely get a chance to read that book. It becomes the most popular book in the classroom. I also find that students are more likely to stick with the book because they're eager to get to the part that I highlighted. And once they do, I have students running up to me, Miss Young, I just read that part from that book talk you did. And they love talking about it with me and their opinions and sharing their thoughts. And then I get to share my thoughts about what I thought when I read that part. It really builds, again, that reading community and that culture you want to have. For our students. So studies show that book talks encourage students to explore new genres and authors, expanding their reading variety. This approach taps into that social aspect of reading, making it feel like a shared experience. Research also highlights that when teachers lead book talks, they model enthusiasm and expose students to a wide range of titles, which contributes to that positive attitude toward reading and, again, building that reading culture. Lastly, another essential part of building that reading culture in my classroom is reinforcing my mantra. My students know this mantra. They repeat the mantra after me. My mantra is reading is thinking and thinking is reading. If you are not thinking, then you are truly not reading. Each student in my classroom keeps a reading journal where they record their thoughts. They use reading strategies while reading. I normally will model the journal entries and how to do this at the very beginning of the year. And throughout the year, we'll hold reading conferences to ensure students are understanding what they're reading and using their reading journals. I also share my own personal reading journal with my students so they can see that I am a reader and I practice what I preach. So I say to them, I do this in my reading at school and I do this at home. This is how you know you're actually reading. So I have students that are showing me even that they go home and they're using journals to write what they're reading and write about what they read. And they're sticky noting. And sometimes we use sticky notes in our books. And just to show that they need to be thinking, and thinking can look a variety of ways, and they could show it a variety of ways. And research shows that reading journals encourage students to engage actively with material by reflecting on themes, characters, and personal reactions, which promotes deeper comprehension. And studies have shown that students who journal about their reading develop stronger connections to the text, making them more likely to read independently. So these are my thoughts on how to create an independent reading culture. I will now turn over the mic to my co-host, Becky Schwartz, on her high school perspective on how to build an independent reading culture.
Hey, thank you so much for that, Lyndsay. A lot of what you talked about, I'm going to mirror as well in my own section or in my own reflection on this portion of our series, which I think is very interesting because at first glance, the age difference that we teach is huge. But I think it just goes to show you that good research and good pedagogy on learning techniques, it's just good pedagogy. It's just good stuff. And it works regardless of the grade level. So I'm going to actually talk about middle school and high school. I do have a little bit of middle school experience, although most of my experience is at the high school level. But we couldn't get a middle school perspective on during this episode, we had some scheduling conflicts that happened, and it's the nature of the beast, right? We're working in a field where time is very, very precious, and so we appreciate any of our guests' time that they give to our podcast. Anyway, as I worked on my sections of each of the episodes for this season, I started to kind of uncover a theme that you're likely probably going to hear in every single episode. But with high school students, and I think even with middle school students, in some ways, you start to have to recapture the magic and repair their relationship with reading. You have to take something that most students are kind of lukewarm about and make it a situationship, right? As my students would call it nowadays, a situationship. And I am by no means an expert at doing this, but I feel the best way that you can do this is to be authentic and honest, right? Secondary students can smell fake from a mile away, and they're really trying and they're really obsessed with like justice and fairness and hypocrisy, and they start to be able to read into you more than I think people give them credit for. So I think it's really important to kind of practice what you preach, and I think being authentic starts with modeling the heck out of reading and explaining literally everything you do. As students get older, the why, it doesn't go away. They just don't ask it as much as the elementary students, but it doesn't make it any more or less important to talk about, right? So give them the talk without preaching it. I talk about reading being a muscle that if you don't use it, you lose it. And if you want to or need to be better at something, you have to do it. And I talked about that in the last episode. But for me, that comes down to reading with them. For the first quarter, I let my students vote for my first quarter read. And I make it a kind of an impossibly long book to show them how to chunk up a massive book, right? How do you eat an elephant is the saying, right? You eat it one bite at a time. So I kind of talk about what this looks like. In the last 2 years, I've read The Count of Monte Cristo, which is the unabridged version, which is ungodly long. And then this fall, I read Feast of Crows, which is the 4th book in George R. R. Martin's Song of Fire and Ice. And both of those had me reading a couple hundred pages a week. Which most people, that's a whole book every single week. And so it got really difficult, but students love holding you accountable for stuff, and they liked giving me grief when my pages didn't go up that far every night. And I don't get obsessed with page counts, but I do talk to them about the importance of like managing your reading every single week, hitting a certain page target or trying to. And they like to know that I practice what I preach, and they like to be like, "Oh, Schwartz, you didn't hit your page count this week. What's going on?" Which is kind of what I would approach them with as well if we were having a conference. Which brings me to my second point. Conferencing and talking with them about their books gives you a chance to not only build relationships with them, but it helps them analyze and think about books in new ways. It also gives you a chance to praise the heck out of the new habit that you're starting to build with them, right? That praise is super critical in that first few months because we forget that reading is hard. Most of us are good readers, and we forget how much work and how hard it is. And like Lyndsay also said, I find that creating a culture comes down to the setting, right? The vibe. Making IR time something that they look forward to. Play ambient music, let them chill out, and by God, let them read what they want to read. Don't get bogged down in every book having to be the most difficult thing ever. The longer I teach, the more I am reminded that the standards and the work that we do day in and day out in school is so intellectually taxing, draining, and our students just need a little bit of joy throughout the day. We forget that upper middle school and high schoolers, they're still kids, and they're craving a chance to be kids. So let them go towards what interests them and work them up the reading ladder slowly. It's all about what you ask the kids to do with their reading that makes it challenging. And that's kind of key. And we'll talk about that later on in this season as well. I've never actually counted the books in my library. The fact that you did, Lyndsay, astounds me. But I'm always adding to this. I'm going to used book sales. I'm begging my friends and family to order from my Amazon wish lists. That's what I usually ask for around the holiday times and around my birthday. I look up books on used book websites. And I know there's a lot of them, but my favorite is betterworldbooks.com because of their one-to-one method with literacy. I apply for grants. I use the money I get from covering on my prep to pay for books. I use the points from my own credit cards. Occasionally, I ask my administrator if there's anything in the budget where I can have like $50 to buy some books. I have some parents in my district that donate books, or as people clean out their basements or their closets, they'll bring me stuff because they know if I can't use it, I'll find somebody who can. But kind of the last thing I want to talk about is a thing that I heard from one of my students recently, who is a reluctant reader and still kind of a reluctant reader. And that's okay, because again, repairing relationships sometimes takes a lot of time, and it might not happen. And that's something that they appreciated. And they said that I told them one time that it was okay to not like reading, and that some people never do, and that's okay. I use my own father as an example in this. Yeah, he read to me and he read for his jobs, but that was about it. If he reads anything now, it's how-to articles or very, very short things in magazines. And that student told me that they felt validated in what I said and respected. That they felt like the teachers who tell them that they just haven't found the right book yet kind of dismissed their feelings about reading. And I can kind of identify with this, right? I feel the same way about exercise and sour cream, right? I'm going to get on a digression here for just a second, but at the end of the day, right, if you don't like something, you don't like something. And we have to recognize that that's okay. So let them know that it's okay not to like it, but that they do need to do it, right? And, well, if they want to be able to be successful in their futures, they need to be able to read things like loan paperwork, contracts for their job, apartment leases, their taxes. They all require reading. They also have to be able to write and communicate with their customers, peers, clients, bosses, coworkers, etc. And to get better at writing, you have to read. And you have to read a lot. And that's paraphrasing Stephen King, which is one of the greats of modern times writing. So I think it's really important with that culture that you kind of create it's okay not to like it. It's okay if this isn't your favorite thing in the world. But at the end of the day, you got to do what you got to do, and you got to get the job done. But hey, listen, that's about all the time we have for this episode. You know, at the end of the day, again, I am just so freaking humbled that some of you tune in and listen to us talk. Lyndsay and I cannot believe that people listen and interact with this podcast. But please keep doing it. We love it. We absolutely love it. So thanks for joining us for our second official episode. We're going to be back with episode 3 on our 5-part series of independent reading for this season. If you want to let us know how we're doing, or if you have ideas of what we should cover next, reach out to us anytime through the email ignitecrwppodcast383@gmail.com. That is Ignite, IGNITE CRWP podcast383@gmail.com. We would absolutely love to hear from you. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter through the Chippewa River Writing Project's page. We are at Chippewa River WP. Fire up and see you soon.